All right, so fresh off of the Elise Stefanik pick for UN ambassador, of course, the New York Times reports last night Trump expected to name Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. That's right. President-elect Donald J. Trump is expected to name Senator Marco Rubio of Florida as his Secretary of State. Three people familiar with his thinking said on Monday, as Mr. Trump moves rapidly to fill out his foreign policy and national security team. Mr. Trump could still change his mind at the last minute, the people said, but appeared to have settled on Marco Rubio, whom he also considered when choosing his running mate this year. That's right, Rubio was on the shortlist for VP as well. Mr. Rubio was elected to the Senate in 2010 and has staked out a position as a foreign policy hawk, taking hard lines on China, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba in particular. He initially found himself at odds with those Republicans who were more skeptical about interventions abroad, but he has also echoed Mr. Trump more recently on issues like Russia's war against Ukraine, saying that the conflict has reached a stalemate and, quote, needs to be brought to a conclusion. Despite speaking in hardline terms about Russia in the past, Mr. Rubio would likely go along with Mr. Trump's expected plans to press Ukraine to find a way to come to a settlement with Russia and remain outside of NATO. It is unclear whether the leaders of Ukraine or Russia would be prepared to enter into talks at Mr. Trump's urging. Mr. Rubio has been among the most outspoken senators on the need for the United States to be more aggressive in China. He has adopted positions that later became more mainstream in both parties. For example, while serving in Congress during the first Trump administration, he began advocating industrial policy meant to help the United States better compete with China's state-directed economy. In 2019, Mr. Rubio helped persuade Mr. Trump to adopt a harsh sanctions policy against Venezuela to try to unseat its authoritarian leftist president, Nicolas Maduro. He's picked a battle he can't win, Mr. Rubio said of Mr. Maduro in an interview with the New York Times. Well, we'll see about that. It's just a matter of time. The only thing we don't know is how long it will take and whether it will be peaceful or bloody. Wow, issuing threats. Okay, now this should really, this, you talk about something that should piss the MAGA base off. Max Blumenthal tweets out this morning, Marco Rubio partnered with convicted criminal Bob Menendez to push for allowing more Venezuelan migrants into the U.S. as the two worked to destroy Venezuela's economy and overthrow its government. Trump has rewarded Rubio, the GOP author of TPS, by nominating him as Secretary of State. So in 2021, Rubio puts out as a press release, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio joined Senators Bob Menendez, Dick Durbin, Patrick Leahy, and Cory Booker, 4 Democrats, in introducing the Venezuela Temporary Protected Status Act, TPS, Temporary Protected Status, a bill to grant temporary protected status for eligible Venezuelans currently in the U.S. who fled the Maduro regime's man-made crisis. Thanks to Rubio's earlier efforts, eligible Venezuelan nationals currently in the U.S. now have deferred enforced departure status that allows them to live and work legally in the U.S. for the next 18 months. Oh, my God. My God. Allowing immigrants to work in the United States. Holy shit. And not only
better hope your job got taken by a Mexican.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Not only did they push for that in 2021, they urged the Biden administration to extend it in 2022. Wow. How do you like that? That is not very MAGA, is it? That's what the Haitian migrants had. They had TPS.
Right. Yeah.
Protections in Springfield, Ohio.
How did they thank us? Eating fluffy, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's quite something. Hey, I guess when we want to violently overthrow your government, we'll let you come here and work. That's awful nice.
Yeah.
That's awful nice of us. Imperialism first, folks. Your job second. See, if you're a blue-collar worker in the Midwest, they don't want immigrants to come and take your job unless they plan to violently overthrow the government of the country where the immigrant lives and steal its oil. Then they'll let the immigrant come and take your job. Yep. See, it's really all about you and your job, isn't it?
Yep.
Don't
really
they care so much about you and your job? Isn't it all about the American worker? You're Secretary of State, by the way, now, chief diplomat, much more important position, by the way, than vice president. As we know from these past 4 years, anybody can be the vice president. Vice president doesn't really do much. All right.
No,
Secretary of
no.
State, Anthony Blinken, right? Played a far more central role in Biden's White House than Kamala Harris. And
They really had President Blinken.
Yeah, exactly.
President Austin.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Kind of ran things between them. No, it's amazing that a couple of guys who on an X, what do they call them on X Spaces?
Spaces.
On an X Spaces would laugh their asses off about firing people who try to organize at Elon's Tesla factories. It is amazing that they don't actually give a shit about you. Right. They don't actually care. They're going to appoint people who don't actually have this agenda they told you that they had. There's the thing. When people said, oh, Trump's a con artist, Thomas Frank, you'll see in the full interview in his op-ed for the New York Times, he says that. They're not wrong. It's just that their people are con artists too. They're just more sophisticated about it. Obama's a much more sophisticated con man than Donald Trump is. But he's a con man. Of course he is.
Yep. So Representative Maria Elvira Salazar, very happy about this pick. Amazing pick with Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. It's a bad day to be a dictator in Latin America.
Unless you're our dictator.
Again, a very America first statement there. It's a bad day to be a dictator in Latin America. Yeah, no, it's our business. It's in the interest of the American people to fuck with Latin American quote unquote dictators. The tone deafness of this, and again, I guess they get away with it because I guess their voters, a lot of them are as stupid as the libs are, is what this boils down to. You understand that statements like that, it's a bad day to be a dictator in Latin America. That's why you have a border problem. That's why you have a border problem. Yes. Right? So if you care so much about your border, then you should be infuriated at statements like that.
Stop fucking with those people.
Exactly.
Let them develop their own societies. Stop interfering in their governments. That's an idea. That you know what that sounds like? That sounds like putting America first.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Let these people do what they want. Worry about our lives here. How about that? I thought that's what they were promising, right? Make America great again.
Well, it's just astounding. I mean, you have somebody would tweet a thing like this, and no doubt this person has also tweeted about the crisis at the southern border. Okay, well, if you don't want the crisis at the southern border, then stop threatening to overthrow Latin American countries. I mean, one follows from the other. It's the most obvious thing in the world. Unfortunately, the MAGA base seems too dumb to understand that. They seem too stupid. They seem incapable of understanding that. I'm sorry, folks. We give it to the libs a lot because they deserve it. Some of you deserve it too. You are idiotic if you don't see that. It's really quite something. I don't mean you, the audience. I mean you, the general MAGA person out there. If there's some crossover, well, so be it. More recently, Mr. Rubio has expressed unalloyed American support for Israel's war in Gaza. When asked by a peace activist late last year what he thought about many Palestinian civilian deaths, of course, he said, I think Hamas is 100% to blame. So this has been making the rounds again. This went pretty viral the first time it was posted, but here's a few months back, Medea Benjamin confronting Marco Rubio over Israel.
Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not.
Gaza?
On the contrary.
Rubio.
Are you filming it?
Wait,
I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way. Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas has stopped building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
Horrifying. I think it's terrible. And I think Hamas is 100% to blame. That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
Well, we are posting.
There you go. Your new Secretary of State. Making America great again, folks.
Yep.
I can feel the greatness. I can feel it. I feel it already. It's like a tingling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Down in the cockles of your heart and other places, right?
Now, of course, this kind of goes without saying. This is the other element, too, that, Rubio was one of the main foils to Donald Trump in that 2016 campaign, earning the Little Marco nickname. Yeah. Mr. Rubio was first elected to the Senate in 2010 as part of a new generation of conservative Tea Party leaders. But some conservatives considered him wobbly on immigration, an issue that caused him political problems when he ran for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016 against Mr. Trump and others. During that campaign, Mr. Trump belittled him as Little Marco, and Mr. Rubio responded with acerbic attacks. But after Mr. Trump's 2016 victory, Mr. Rubio went on to patch things up with him, serving as an informal foreign policy advisor and helping to prepare him for his first debate against Mr. Biden in 2020. So Dan Cohen, our friend, tweeted out this montage of Marco Rubio taking his digs at Donald Trump throughout the 2016 primary. A little trip down memory lane while we're at it.
There's no way we are going to allow a con artist to take over the conservative movement, and Donald Trump is a con artist.
Donald Trump is a con artist.
He's a con man. I think it's time to unmask him for what he is. A con man who's taking advantage of people's fears and anxieties about the future, portraying himself as some sort of strong guy. He's not a strong guy.
He doesn't sweat. He doesn't sweat because his pores are clogged from the spray tan that he used.
You all have friends that are thinking about voting for Donald Trump. Friends, do not let friends vote for con artists.
We're about to turn over the conservative movement to a person that has no ideas of any substance on the important issues, the nuclear codes of the United States, to an erratic individual.
So we cannot allow the conservative movement to be taken over by a con artist.
How can the nominee of the Republican Party, of the party of Lincoln, the party of Reagan, the party of hope, and the party of optimism nominate someone who refuses to criticize the Ku Klux Klan or distance himself from an avowed racist like David Duke?
That the party of Lincoln and Reagan and the presidency of the United States will never be held by a con artist. Guys, we have a con artist as the front runner in the Republican Party. A guy who has made a career out of telling people lies.
He's always calling me Little Marco. And I don't think that he's taller than me. He's like 6'2", which is why I don't understand why his hands are the size of someone who's 5'2". Have you seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands? You can't trust them. You can't trust them. You can't trust them.
Of course, Trump got his revenge here. Play this as long as we're reminiscing about old times. One of his better prop comedy shticks.
It's Rubio. That's what it.
If we go back to that 2016 campaign, look at Donald Trump here tweeting out Sheldon Adelson is looking to give big dollars to Rubio because he feels he can mold him into his perfect little puppet. Now, he's talking about Sheldon, obviously, who has since passed away. But calling out Rubio for being a puppet of the Adelsons. Turns out Donald Trump seems to be fitting into that role just fine 9 years later. But if we hone in on that word puppet, wherever we've been using that word puppet to describe Kamala Harris, Marco Rubio is very much the Kamala of the Republican Party. Like, they really wanted him to happen in 2016. He was really the establishment plan, even more so than Jeb. I mean, Jeb, they kind of had to give right of first refusal since was Republican royalty at the time.
From this dynasty.
Right. But Rubio was the one they really had their eye on. Just like in 2016, it had to be Hillary, but they really had their eyes on Kamala to try and make happen. Same thing. He was the guy that they were grooming to be the standard bearer, and look where he is. Look where he is now. Secretary of State, as we've learned, is a springboard to the nomination. So to elevate him in this way is to really put him forward as a future player in the party. If it happens, looks 99% certain it will at this point. Go ahead.
Well, this is why I always say reading the Republican Party as intrinsically hostile to diversity in elected officials is a real misreading. They like to hide behind marginalized groups just as much as the Democrats do. More so, even because they get branded with that label of being racist. When they can get someone like Marco Rubio to institute the same policies, just like the libs love having someone like Kamala locking up black men so they can hide behind her They love it. They love it. They love a guy like Rubio. They love
Yes.
people like Tim Scott. I saw one of the conservative MAGA people doing a poll of who people really wanted to become the speaker. Tim Scott.
Yeah.
Head and shoulders above everybody else.
Especially now. And, you know, if you look back to 2016, that was coming off of 2012, where Romney did terribly with Latinos. He got blown out with Latinos. I think he only got 25% of their vote share. And so they were really looking to Rubio to be the future of the party. But just like Kamala, he struggled to get votes, right? He had the stamp of approval of the party bosses, but he struggled to get people to care about him. Well, here he is now, looks like Secretary of State. I want to play one more piece of video. So this is from over the summer. This was in early July, when it was rumored that Marco Rubio was being considered for vice president. And, of course, Tulsi, it's pretty obvious she wanted to be considered for vice president as well. So here is Tulsi Gabbard on the Megyn Kelly show talking about what a mistake it would be for Donald Trump to name Marco Rubio his running mate, which was a possibility at the time of this interview.
A huge mistake for President Trump to choose him, because he represents the neocon warmongering establishment of Washington, D.C., which stands diametrically opposed to the very policies that President Trump has always stood for, going all the way back to when he ran for president in 2016 through that first term in office, and the things that he's talking about wanting to do now. And it would send the wrong message to a lot of folks who are very concerned about the fact that we are on the brink of war with Russia and China and Iran and North Korea. If Marco Rubio is his vice president, then that is what we will face, and it will cause a lot of people to question what kind of foreign policy will actually be executed. Will it be the one that Trump wants and stands for, or will it be one that will continue the deep state neocon warmongers who've gotten us into the mess that we are in now?
Okay, so now I want to see all these Rescue the Republic people speak out now.
Yeah.
Where are you? Now the proof is in the pudding. You guys all got in this boat on the poster and in real life.
Washington crossing the Delaware.
With Donald Trump. Are you all going to speak out now that you see this cabinet taking shape, or are you going to just stay quiet? You know, you got now this is the side where your bread is buttered, or you all going to shut the fuck up. Now, I would predict the latter. I don't think you're going to hear shit from Tulsi about this. I don't think you're going to hear a damn thing from her about it.
Yeah, she got hers, unless they have a job for her lined up somewhere else. So far, she's striking out quite a bit. Got passed over for vice president, passed over for Secretary of State. We'll see what happens with Secretary of Defense. Homeland Security's already been chosen. Turns out all these like mavericks so far, you know, the RFKs, the Tulsi Gabbards, the Elon Musks, right? This sort of like viewpoint diverse, very podcasty coalition. So far, at least, we're only in. So far, they're all getting shut out. So far, is a good old boys and girls club. Mike Huckabee, Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Rick Scott is who they're pushing for Senate leader. Mike Waltz, who we're going to talk about in the next segment. So far, this looks like same old, same old. All of those edgelords seem to be getting shafted so far. So far, it's only a day in. Obviously, we don't know yet. But what she said there at the end of that piece, if Marco Rubio is picked as VP, that will signal that we're not going to get the foreign policy that Trump wants, but that the neocon warmongers want. That goes double now, because as I said earlier, the Secretary of State's a much more consequential role than the Vice President. The Vice President is basically the understudy for the President, you know, and they head up certain projects at the President's pleasure. The Secretary of State, that's the chief diplomat. They have a lot more to do with setting foreign policy than the Vice President does. So if she was concerned about him being VP, she should be very worried now. But is she? Who knows? Right.
And then when you look at some roles that would have been possible if they really wanted to elevate Tulsi, like National Security Advisor, how's that going to work when you got a Secretary of State who is a total neocon? Like what? It seems much less likely she would even be given a role like that if they're constructing this kind of a cabinet.
I think National Security Advisor's already been picked, as I understand.
Did they already pick that?
Yeah. So, you're running out of options there. I mean, Who knows? They give her an ambassadorship somewhere. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like the Secretary
Ambassador
of State
to Lithuania.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, Secretary of State, that's the big one. I mean, that really is the most important one. That is the most reflective of your attitude towards foreign policy in the world, even more so than Secretary of Defense. I mean, Secretary of State really speaks volumes. And if it's Rubio, yeah, that is everything that the MAGA base voted against.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Welcome to MAGA.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Welcome to MAGA.
Please clap.